Rescued from the streets, she became the strongest alien warrior. The rain hit the neon streets of view like liquid static, each drop fizzing against the glowing pavement, reflecting the advertisements that flickered and rolled across the city's towering spires. The air was thick with the scent of synth oil and fried protein cubes, the distant hum of hovercrafts weaving. Between skyscrapers, this city never slept, never cared, never slowed down for anyone left. Behind Ethan, Voss had learned that the hard way. He pulled his coat tighter, stepping over a discarded mech arm. Twitching with residual charge, its owner nowhere in sight, typical. He'd spent enough years in the underbelly of VX to know that if you weren't moving forward, you were already forgotten. It wasn't a place for strays, which was why when he first spotted the figure huddled in the alleyway, he almost kept walking. Almost. The figure was motionless, wrapped in layers of ragged cloth, as if the fabric itself was holding them together. It was the kind of sight that was too common in view, too easy to ignore, but something was off. Ethan slowed his pace, boots splashing in puddles of rainwater laced with engine grease. The figure stirred just barely, and a pale face turned toward him from beneath the hood, sharp features, silver eyes too bright in the dim alley, and then the most noticeable detail, long ears tapering into delicate points. Not human. His first instinct was to walk away, not because he had anything against off-worlders. Hell, he'd worked alongside enough of them to know better, but because alien strays tended to attract trouble, the kind that left people with holes burned through their chests. Then her stomach growled loud. Ethan arched a brow. You planning on eating me, or is there a food stand behind me? I didn't notice. The woman didn't answer. She was too busy staring at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Ethan sighed. All right, stay there or don't. Honestly, not my problem. He turned and walked across the street to a rundown food stall, its metal shutters half closed. The vendor, an old man with cybernetic fingers, barely looked up from his screen. One bowl of. Ethan glanced at the menu. Everything sounded vaguely like chicken, but legally couldn't be. Whatever passes for edible. Tonight, the old man tapped his wrist console. A mechanical arm assembled the meal in seconds, steaming synth noodles in a broth that smelled vaguely of soy and regret. Ethan grabbed the bowl, walked back to the alley, and crouched in front of the alien woman. He set the food down between them and leaned against the opposite wall. She stared at it. It's not poisoned, Ethan muttered, unless you count bad cooking as a biological weapon. Still, she didn't move. Only when Ethan made a show of pretending to leave did she lunge forward, gripping the bowl like it was the first solid thing in the universe. She ate like a starving animal, which, to be fair, she probably was. The speed at which she inhaled the food was both impressive and mildly horrifying. You know, I'm 90% sure the instructions said to chew. Ethan noted. The woman barely glanced up more. Ethan blinked. That was an entire meal. Are you hiding a black hole in there? She wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve, expression unreadable. More. Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. Fine, but this time try not to look like you're about to eat the bowl. 2 minutes later, she was working on her second serving, this time slightly more human in her approach. By the third, she actually looked at him, not just glanced. Looked. You are helping me, she said, as if the concept was foreign. Ethan shrugged. Well, I could have left you to the rats, but they looked full. She tilted her head. You speak lightly. Yeah, it's called humor. Keeps me from going insane. A beat of silence, then, to Ethan's surprise, she mimicked his shrug. It does not seem effective. Ethan chuckled despite himself. Yeah, well, jury's still out on that one. The rain slowed to a drizzle, the streets quieter now. Ethan studied her as she finished her meal, watching the way she moved, carefully controlled, like someone always ready to bolt. There was something else too, something beneath the exhaustion, beneath the hunger. She wasn't just lost, she was hiding. You got a name? He asked. The woman hesitated. Look, if it's some 16-syllable alien nightmare I can work with. An abbreviation, Ethan offered. Another pause, then Aria. It didn't sound like a lie. It didn't sound like the truth either, but it was something all right. Aria, Ethan exhaled, leaning his head against the wall. So what's your deal? You wake up one day and just decide, hey, let's be homeless on the worst planet. The galaxy. Aria's gaze flickered, and for the first time something like uncertainty crossed her face. I do not know, she admitted. I remember waking here. Before that, she stopped, frowning. It is fog. Ethan watched her carefully. No memories at all. I remember how to fight, she murmured, more to herself than to him. My body remembers that got his attention military, she didn't answer. Ethan sighed. Well, that's vague and ominous, he stretched, rolling his shoulders. Guess. That means you don't have anywhere to go, huh? Arya shook her head. Figures. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, staring at the sky. The city loomed above, cold and indifferent. He wasn't sure why he was hesitating. He had no reason to take her and no reason to care, and yet he thought about the way she had looked at him when he handed her that first bowl of food, like she had expected him to walk away. Like she had been right to expect it. Ethan sighed. All right, listen, I've got a place. It's nothing fancy, just an apartment, slightly less disgusting than this alley. If you don't try to kill me in my sleep, you're welcome to crash there. Arya studied him like he was an alien. You do not even know me, she said. Ethan smirked. Yeah, well, maybe. An optimist. Arya narrowed her eyes. That does not seem accurate. Okay. Maybe I just make bad decisions. A pause, then, to his utter shock, Arya nodded. All right. Ethan blinked. Really, no dramatic refusal, no cryptic speech about trust. Arya shrugged. I have nowhere else to go and you provided food. It is logical. Wow, that's the most practical way anyone's ever agreed to something. Ethan pushed himself up, stretching. All right, then let's go, and if you snore, I swear I'm throwing you back into the alley. Arya tilted her head. I do not know if I snore. Great, we'll find out together. And with that, the lost alien woman followed the man who had decided, for reasons still unknown to him, to save her the door to Ethan's apartment groaned as it slid open, its aging mechanism wheezing like an asthmatic engine. The place was small, cluttered but functional, half workshop, half living space. A workbench in the corner was littered with dismantled tech wires spilling onto the floor like cybernetic entrails. A single couch sat across from an old hollow screen that flickered with static, and in the farthest corner a narrow cot barely wide enough for a person to roll over without falling off. Arya stepped inside her, silver eyes scanning the room with a calculating precision Ethan found mildly unsettling. She moved like a ghost, silent and deliberate, her long ears twitching slightly, as if listening for hidden threats. Ethan tossed his coat onto the back of a chair and gestured around. Welcome to my kingdom. It's a bit of a mess, but it hasn't killed me yet. Arya tilted her head. Yet, yeah, well, the toaster tried once, but we've reached truce. As if in response, the toaster on the counter sparked ominously. Arya eyed it with suspicion before slowly turning back to him. This space is inefficient, she observed. Ethan scoffed, flopping onto the couch. Oh, I'm sorry, did you expect a penthouse? Because I distinctly remember finding you in a trash alley. Arya didn't react to the sarcasm. Instead, she knelt beside the workbench, her fingers brushing over a disassembled pulse pistol. You repair weapons, sometimes pays the bills. Ethan watched as she picked up a plasma cell, turning it over with practiced ease. You know what you're holding, or are you about to blow a hole in my floor? She didn't even glance up. Mark 7 plasma core drains quickly but delivers a focused burst, inefficient for prolonged engagements. Ethan blinked. Yeah, that's correct. She set the core down and moved to a different piece, a serrated combat knife with a grip designed for high-speed melee combat. She balanced it in her palm, then flipped it in a smooth motion, catching it effortlessly. Ethan sat up. Okay, see, that is not normal. I was just a lost alien waif behavior. Arya finally looked at him. I told you my body remembers. Ethan exhaled. All right, well, let's start with basics. You don't have a memory, you don't have a home, and apparently you have very specific murder instincts. So what's the plan? She considered for a long moment. Survival. Yeah, that's not a plan, that's a setting on an emergency beacon. She gave him a blank stare. Ethan sighed and stood stretching. All right, we'll figure this out in the morning. You can take the cot. Arya glanced at the narrow bed, then back at Ethan. Where will you sleep? The couch. She frowned. You are larger than the couch. Wow, thanks. I love being reminded of that. Arya continued studying him as if she was trying to calculate the efficiency of his decision. Then, with no further argument, she moved to the cot and sat stiffly, as though unsure how to proceed. Ethan smirked. You do know how beds work, right? I assume I lie down, correct? Gold star for you. She hesitated only briefly before lying back, her arms folded across her stomach in an almost rigid posture. Ethan shook his head, dropping onto the couch with a sigh. Relax, Arya, I'm not going to kill you in your sleep. I was not worried about that, she said softly. Ethan blinked, but when he turned His head to look at her eyes were already closed, she had expected to die out there, he didn't say anything instead. He stared at the ceiling listening to the distant hum of the city outside. Val had a way of chewing people up and spitting them out, but maybe Arya wasn't as lost as she thought. The morning came with the usual sound of advertisements blaring through the city's speaker grid, promising the best. Deals on cybernetic implants and legally ambiguous pharmaceuticals, Ethan groaned, rubbing his face as he sat up. Arya was already awake, standing in the center of the room. Stretching her arms in slow, controlled movements, Ethan paused, watching as she shifted into a low stance, her feet gliding across the floor with unnerving precision. It wasn't just a morning stretch, it was a routine, a fighter's warm-up. Okay, yeah, we definitely need to talk about this. Arya turned her head slightly. About what? You the whole probably trained to kill thing. She straightened, tilting her head. Would it trouble you if I had been, Little Ethan stood, running a hand through his hair. Look, if you want to stick around, we need to figure out what you can do, and since you apparently have muscle memory for combat, let's put it to the test. Arya considered this for a moment before nodding. Acceptable. Ethan gestured toward the workbench. All right. Pick your weapon. She glanced over the scattered gear, then reached for the combat knife she had tested the night before. Ethan raised a brow. Interesting choice. All right, let's see what you got. They moved to the open space near the center of the room, where Ethan had cleared enough space for sparring. He picked up a training blade, a dull but weighted knife, and held it loosely. No real weapons, just testing your skills. Arya nodded once, then she moved. Ethan barely had time to react before she was on him, her blades slicing through the air. He blocked, but the force of her strike sent vibrations up his arm. She wasn't just fast, she was precise. He twisted, trying to break her momentum, but she anticipated, pivoting smoothly and pressing forward. Okay, out. Ethan barely dodged a strike aimed at his ribs. You do realize this is just training, right? Arya didn't respond. Her movements were almost mechanical, instinctual. She wasn't just good, she was programmed for this. Ethan barely managed to shift his stance, catching her wrist and twisting. She stumbled just for a fraction of a second, and he used the opening to sweep her legs out from under her. She hit the ground hard but rolled to her feet almost instantly. Ethan held up a hand. All right. I've seen enough. Arya straightened, tilting her head. Was that satisfactory? That was terrifying. Arya blinked. Then I did well. Ethan huffed a laugh. Yeah, you did well. She nodded, seemingly pleased, and set the knife back on the table. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. All right, you clearly have combat instincts, which means you were trained, maybe even enhanced. That's not normal. Arya was silent for a moment, then quietly she said, I do not know who I was, but I do not think I was someone kind. Ethan studied her, then shook his head. Nah, you're just someone trying to figure out who they are now, and trust me, who you were doesn't have to decide who you become. Arya glanced at him, silver eyes unreadable. For the first time, she almost smiled. The streets of Veal never really quieted, even in the so-called off hours. The hum of hovercrafts passing overhead, the flickering neon signs advertising everything from illegal cybernetics to authentic off-world cuisine, it all blended into a background noise. Ethan had long since learned to ignore Arya, however, had not she walked beside him. Her posture tense, silver eyes darting from shadowed alleyways to bustling storefronts. Her long ears twitched at every sudden sound, a hover drone whizzing overhead, a vendor shouting about discounted plasma cartridges, the deep bassy thrum of a security patrol mech stomping past. You know, if you keep looking around like that, people are going to think you're planning to rob the place. Ethan muttered. I am scanning for threats. Arya corrected, her voice flat. Ethan sighed. Yeah, well, tone it down before we both get arrested. She glanced at him. Would that be problematic? Ethan gave her a look. Arya, I like not being in jail. I see. She paused, then I shall ensure you remain not in jail. Ethan smirked. Thanks, really warms my heart. They were headed toward the lower districts, an area of Vakes that made Ethan's own rundown apartment look like luxury living. He'd heard whispers about an old contact selling some military-grade tech, and while Ethan generally preferred not to get tangled in that kind of business, something told him that figuring out what Arya was and who had trained her might require a little digging. I am still uncertain why we are here. Arya said, stepping carefully over a puddle that probably wasn't just water. We're here because if you've got combat skills wired into your brain, chances are someone out there knows why, Ethan explained, and in my experience, if you need to find information, no one wants to share you. Talk to the people who sell information. Arya considered this. You believe I was a weapon? I think someone wanted you to be. They turned a corner into an alley lit only by the eerie blue glow of a malfunctioning street lamp. A few figures lingered in the shadows. Black market dealers, scavengers looking for broken tech to repurpose, and one guy who might have actually been a pile of old cyber limbs stitched together. Stay close, Ethan muttered. I was already planning to, Arya replied. The door they were looking for was an old reinforced metal hatch with an outdated retinal scanner. Easily bypassed if you knew the right trick. Ethan tapped the panel twice, waited for the beep, then smacked the side of it. The door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit interior that smelled of old circuitry and fried wiring. Inside, a man sat behind a cluttered counter, his cybernetic arms warring softly as he adjusted a glowing hollow display. His name was Garrick, and he looked exactly as Ethan remembered. Like someone who had decided sleep was optional and caffeine was a suitable replacement for blood. Well. Garrick drawled, not looking up. If it isn't Ethan Voss, professional mistake maker. Ethan grinned. Hey, that's freelance mistake maker. Thank you very much. Garrick finally looked up, and his cybernetic eyes flickered in Arya's direction. And who's the new face? She's a friend, Ethan said carefully. Arya simply nodded. Arya. Garrick studied her for a moment, then snorted. Not much of a talker. Hush, she prefers stabbing, Ethan quipped. Arya frowned. That is inaccurate. I also kick. Garrick barked a laugh. I like her. Ethan sighed. Great, now look, we need information specifically on off-world combat training programs, anything dealing with enhanced reflexes, muscle memory conditioning, maybe even genetic modification. Garrick raised a brow. That's a pretty specific request, Voss. Ethan shrugged. Call it curiosity. Garrick leaned back, rubbing his jaw. Well, I might know a thing or two about black site projects that mess with people's heads, but information like that. He tapped his cybernetic fingers against the counter. Going to cost you, Ethan sighed. Of course it is. Before he could start negotiating, Arya moved. In the blink of an eye, she had flipped a small blade from Ethan's belt, spun it in her fingers, and sent it flying. The blade embedded itself perfectly between Garrick's fingers, just close enough to graze the metal plating of his cybernetic hand. Garrick froze. Arya tilted her head. We require information. Ethan blinked. Arya, what the hell? Garrick let out a low whistle. Damn, you weren't kidding about the stabbing thing. Arya remained expressionless. Kicking was not an option. Ethan groaned. Okay, let's not threaten the man. We need favors from Garrick. Surprisingly grinned. Actually, I like her style. Tell you what, I'll waive the fee this time, purely because I do not want to be stabbed today. Arya nodded. Efficient. Eric pulled up a hollow screen and scrolled through a list of encrypted files. All right, you're looking for black site training programs, right? Well, there's one name that keeps popping up in whispered conversations, Project Revenant. Ethan frowned. Never heard of it. Not surprising, Garrick said. Most people haven't, but if even half the rumors are true, it was a project designed to create, well, something like her. He nodded toward Arya. Arya's silver eyes flickered. Explain. Garrick pulled up an old grainy image, faded security footage of figures moving in unison, their movements too precise, too controlled. They were fast, efficient, deadly. No one knows where the project was based or who ran it. Garrick continued, but the subjects, they disappeared. Ethan glanced at Arya. She was still staring at the screen, her fingers subtly flexing, as if recalling a long-buried instinct. What were they used for? She asked softly. Garrick hesitated. If the rumors are true, assassination, black ops missions, the kind of things governments pretend they don't fund. Ethan exhaled. Great, so we might be dealing with people who don't want Arya asking questions. Garrick nodded. And if she really was part of Project Revenant, then she's not just a lost off-worlder. His cybernetic fingers tapped the counter. She's a missing weapon. Silence settled between them. Finally, Ethan turned to Arya. Well, that's not great news. Arya met his gaze. It does not change my current state. Maybe not, Ethan said, but it means someone might come looking for you. Arya considered that for a moment, then slowly she smirked. Let them try. Garrick chuckled. Oh, Yeah, I really like her, Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. I have made so many bad life choices. Arya tilted her head, and yet you continue to make them, Ethan huffed. Yeah, let's just get out of here before I regret this even more. And with that, the man and the lost warrior stepped back into the neon-lit city, the weight of new questions pressing down on them. The streets of View had a way of making people feel watched. It wasn't just the endless rows of surveillance drones hovering at the periphery of the skyline or the persistent hum of security mechs stomping through the lower districts. It was the feeling that someone somewhere was always listening, watching, waiting. Ethan wasn't normally the paranoid type, but ever since Garrick had dropped the words Project Revenant into their laps, he'd felt an itch at the back of his mind, a nagging, insistent voice that whispered, "You're in over your head." And to be fair, the voice wasn't wrong. Are you certain these disguises are sufficient? Arya asked, adjusting the oversized coat Ethan had thrown over her shoulders. It was several sizes too big, making her look like a child trying to steal their parents' wardrobe. Absolutely not, Ethan admitted, tugging the brim of his hat lower over his face. But you know what they say, if you look like you belong, people don't ask questions. Arya studied their reflections in a shop window. I look like I am concealing contraband. Well, technically you are. Contraband, Ethan muttered. She arched a brow. That is offensive, Ethan sighed. Look, just act natural. Arya's expression shifted into something terrifyingly blank. Ethan groaned. Not that natural. They were making their way toward the Sky Deck Transit Hub, a sprawling multi-level station where the wealthier residents of View could catch high-speed transport off-world or to the pristine intersectors of the city. It wasn't exactly the kind of place Ethan and Arya typically frequented. He preferred locations where the security drones weren't actively scanning for trouble, but if Project Revenant was real, then they needed off-world information. That meant finding someone with access to higher-level records, which meant finding Saskia. Ethan had done business with Saskia in the past, or more accurately, Saskia had blackmailed him into doing favors for her, and he had begrudgingly accepted, because saying no to Saskia was like saying no to gravity. They pushed their way through the bustling crowds, dodging sleek-looking business types and the occasional mech servant carrying luggage. Arya walked beside him, stiff-backed and alert, her silver eyes scanning the environment with precise, almost mechanical focus. You're too focused, Ethan muttered. You need to look, I don't know, relaxed. Arya immediately slouched her shoulders. Ethan blinked. Wow, that is somehow worse. She straightened. Then I will continue scanning for threats. Yeah, you do. That they reached the entrance of a high-end bar on the upper level of the Sky Deck, a place called the Gilded Coil. It was the kind of establishment that served overpriced drinks in gravitide fang glasses and had walls embedded with shifting holograms of abstract art that made Ethan's brain hurt. A well-dressed bouncer stood by the entrance, scanning guests as they arrived. His gaze flicked over Ethan and Arya with the disinterest of someone who had seen far worse than a guy in a beat-up coat and a woman drowning in fabric. Ethan cleared his throat. We're here to see Saskia, the bouncer barely reacted. Appointment. Ethan hesitated. It's a surprise visit. The bouncer tapped the side of his cybernetic temple, processing something before glancing back down at Ethan. She says if you're here to beg for credits. The answer is still no. Ethan scowled. Wow, tell her that's not why I'm here. There was a pause, then the bouncer stepped aside. Go in, don't touch anything expensive. Ethan shot Arya a glance. See, easy. Arya muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like I was prepared to use force. They stepped inside, greeted by the low, pulsing thrum of ambient music and the scent of expensive liquor. The patrons were a mix of high-class corporate types and off-worlders in sleek, custom-tailored attire. At the far end of the lounge, Saskia sat draped across a velvet chair, a smirk playing at her lips. She was, as Ethan remembered, all sharp angles and sharper words, her dark eyes gleaming with amusement as she sipped from a crystalline glass. Well, she mused, if it isn't Ethan Voss, the man who still owes me 3 favors and a drink. Ethan forced a grin. Hey, Saskia, you look expensive. She smirked. I am. What do you want? Ethan motioned toward Arya. This is Arya. She's got a past that some very dangerous people might be interested in, and we need information. Saskia's gaze slid to Arya, taking in the long ears, the too perfect posture, the almost imperceptible Way she shifted her weight like someone trained to react in an instant. Interesting, Saskia murmured. I take it. This isn't just a lost tourist situation, Ethan huffed. Not unless you're average tourist comes with Black Ops combat training. Saskia leaned forward, intrigued. And what makes you think I have the answers you need? Because you have answers to everything, Ethan said, and you love knowing things that other people don't. Saskia tapped her nails against her glass, considering, then she smirked. You're not wrong. She activated a hollow screen, the light reflecting off her polished rings. A few quick keystrokes, and a flurry of encrypted files hovered in the air. I've heard whispers about Project Revenant, she admitted, but whispers don't come cheap. Ethan groaned. Of course they don't. Saskia grinned. Relax, I like you, boss. I'll give you this one for free. Ethan blinked. Wait, really? Saskia's grin widened. Number, but your reaction was adorable. Ethan sighed. I hate you. Saskia ignored him. Project Revenant wasn't just about creating warriors, it was about creating loyalty, the kind that can't be broken, the kind that runs deeper than programming, deeper than memory. Arya's expression remained unreadable, but her hands curled into fists. Saskia tilted her head. I take it you're having trouble remembering your past. Arya nodded once. Saskia's smirk faded slightly. Then, you might not like what you find. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Ethan exhaled. Yeah, well, we still need to know. Saskia studied them for a long moment, then flicked a file toward Ethan's holopad. Good luck, she said. You're going to need it. Ethan glanced at Arya. She was already reading the file, her silver eyes reflecting the glowing text. Whatever answers lay ahead, one thing was certain: they were just getting started. The hum of the airship's engine vibrated through the floor, a steady pulse beneath Ethan's boots as he leaned against the rusted railing of the cargo bay. Outside the viewport, the neon-drenched skyline of Veal stretched into the distance, flickering like a city built from shattered glass and broken promises. Arya sat cross-legged on a crate beside him, her silver eyes locked onto the helipad in her hands. The files Saskia had given them were dense, filled with fragmented data and redacted reports, but Arya read them with the precision of someone determined to make sense of the impossible. You know, Ethan said, scratching at the stubble on his jaw, I've worked with smugglers, bounty hunters, and one guy who was technically three guys sharing a single cybernetic body, and even they didn't take their work as seriously as you. Arya didn't look up. Your previous associates sound inefficient. They were, yeah, Ethan admitted, but they also knew when to take a break. He nudged her foot lightly with his boot. Come on, you've been staring at that thing for hours. At this rate, your brain's going to overheat. Arya finally lifted her gaze. That is not how my brain functions. Ethan smirked. Yeah. Figures. The airship rattled slightly as they hit turbulence, and Ethan pushed away from the railing to check the nav controls. They weren't flying anything fancy, just a borrowed cargo hauler with barely functioning cloaking tech and a distressing tendency to shut down mid-flight if pushed too hard. So he said, watching Arya out of the corner of his eye, are we going to address the fact that your past might involve experimental mind control? Arya was quiet for a moment, then she said it would explain certain gaps. Ethan exhaled. Yeah, gaps like a whole missing childhood. Arya frowned slightly. Memories are fragmented. I recall training missions, orders. She hesitated, but not who gave them. Ethan leaned against the console. That's messed up. Arya tilted her head. Is it? He stared at her. Yes, I mean, do you think it's normal to just wake up one day and not remember where you came from? She considered this. Perhaps not, but I know who I am now. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then sighed, raking a hand through his hair. Well, that's something at least. Arya returned her focus to the holopad, scrolling through another classified document. According to these files, Project Revenant was shut down after a massive failure. Ethan frowned. Define failure. The test subjects. Arya murmured, stopped following orders. Ethan whistled. I'm guessing that didn't go over well with whoever was running the place. No. Arya's jaw tightened. They were terminated. The airship hit another pocket of turbulence, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Ethan said, but you weren't. Arya's grip on the holopad tightened. No. A cold realization settled in Ethan's chest. Which means someone spared you. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Before either of them could dwell on it further, the cockpit's calm system crackled to life. Voss, you there? Ethan groaned. Great Just what I needed. He reached over and flicked the switch. Yeah, Garrick, we're here. What do you want? The voice on the other end was laced with static, but still carried the familiar, irritating charm of Garrick, their part-time fixer. And full-time pain in the ass, I assume you're en route to that very bad idea you told me about earlier. Ethan rolled his eyes. If you mean tracking down the remnants of a top-secret program that may or may not have been designing super soldiers, then yeah, that's the one. Garrick let out a long-suffering sigh. Listen, pal, I did some digging of my own and let's just say you're about to step on a landmine. Ethan exchanged a glance with Arya. Define landmine, I mean. Someone else is already looking for Project Revenant survivors, and they're not looking to throw a reunion party. Arya's posture stiffened. Who? Garrick hesitated. No name, but they've been hitting old research sites, taking out anyone who might know something. Ethan's stomach twisted. Let me guess, no survivors, no bodies either, Garrick said grimly. Just erased. Silence stretched between them. Finally Arya spoke. They will come for me. Ethan sighed. Yeah. Well, let him try. There was another pause, then Garrick muttered, you are so bad at staying out of trouble. Ethan grinned. What can I say? It's a gift. Garrick groaned. Just try not to die, okay? I kind of like you in a not being dead way. The comms cut off with a sharp crackle. Ethan exhaled and turned to Arya. Well, this just got a whole lot more fun. Arya arched a brow. Your definition of fun is questionable. Ethan smirked. You should see my definition of relaxing. Arya didn't dignify that with a response. Instead, she closed the holopad and rose to her feet, her expression unreadable. We need to move faster, she said. If others are searching for Project Revenant, they may know more than we do. Ethan nodded. Yeah, and I'd rather not wait around for them to find us first. He moved to the ship's controls, adjusting their course. The nav screen flickered, plotting a new destination. They were heading straight into the unknown, toward whatever truth lay buried in Arya's past, and if someone was hunting for answers too well, Ethan figured they'd just have to make sure they found them first. The sky over Vilex's outer districts was the color of bruised metal, a storm brewing in the upper atmosphere. Lightning slashed the sky, illuminating the skyline in brief electric bursts. Ethan adjusted his grip on the ship's controls, feeling the subtle tremors of turbulence shudder through the hull. Arya stood beside him, watching the nav screen as it projected their destination, a derelict station on the outskirts of the city, deep in a sector where even law enforcement refused to tread. The place had once been a research hub before it was shut down and wiped from official records. Now it was just another skeleton in Vilex's closet, so Ethan said, on a scale of mildly alarming to completely suicidal. Where do you think this plan falls? Arya didn't hesitate. Somewhere between reckless and catastrophic. Ethan sighed. Yeah, that sounds about right. The comms crackled to life again. And this time, the voice that came through wasn't Garrick's. It was mechanical, distorted, unidentified vessel. You are entering restricted airspace. Turn back. Ethan let out a slow breath. Great, the automated death threat came early this time. Arya tilted her head. Perhaps they are simply being efficient. Ethan pressed a button on the console. Hey, friendly murderbots, we're just here for a quick visit. Thought we'd stop by, maybe borrow some top-secret files. You mind? Silence. Then you have 10 seconds to comply. Ethan tensed. Okay, well, that's unfriendly. Arya's fingers hovered over the weapons controls. They will fire upon us. Ethan flashed a tight grin. Not if we fire first. The ship banked hard as he yanked the controls, spinning them sideways just as a barrage of laser fire ripped through the air where they'd been seconds earlier. Arya was already targeting the station's defense turrets, her hands moving with terrifying precision as she disabled the first set with a rapid series of pulse blasts. The sky turned into a war zone, streaks of energy fire crisscrossing as the ship dodged and weaved through the onslaught. Ethan gritted his teeth as alarms blared. Shields at 30% were not going to last long out here, he muttered. We need a way in. Arya's eyes flicked across the readouts there. Lower access bay. It appears to be lightly guarded. Ethan snorted. Yeah. Probably because anyone who lands there gets immediately vaporized. Arya didn't respond. She was already adjusting their trajectory, guiding them straight toward the bay. The ship lurched as another blast skimmed the hull, sending sparks flying across the console. Ethan clenched his jaw. If we survive this, remind me to Take a vacation maybe somewhere without automated gun turrets. Arya's lips quirked slightly, noted they hit the landing thrusters hard, skidding into the bay just as the station's outer defenses recalibrated. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing them in. For a moment there was silence. Ethan let out a breath. Well, that was awful. Arya was already standing, unholstering her weapon. We must move quickly. Ethan rubbed his face. No, great job, Ethan, you didn't crash us into a fiery death. Arya blinked. Your survival was expected. Ethan groaned. Yeah, let's go. They moved fast, slipping through the dark corridors of the abandoned station. The air smelled of dust and old circuitry, the remnants of a place that had once buzzed with life but was now little more than a graveyard. Arya moved with calculated precision, every step measured, every glance assessing for threats. Ethan, on the other hand, was mostly trying not to trip over broken floor panels. You'd think they'd keep these places a little more maintained, he muttered, stepping over a tangle of exposed wiring. Arya didn't respond. She had stopped in front of a rusted terminal, fingers dancing over the keys as she attempted to bypass the station security locks. Ethan leaned against the wall. So how illegal is what you're doing right now? Arya didn't even look up. On most worlds, very. Ethan grinned. Good to know. The terminal beeped and the screen flickered to life. Lines of encrypted data scrolled across it and Arya's eyes narrowed. Project Revenant logs, she murmured. Ethan straightened. What's in them? Arya's fingers moved swiftly, pulling up files, searching for something. Then she froze. Ethan frowned. What is it? She didn't speak, just pointed. Ethan followed her gaze, reading the highlighted text. Subject: Alpha status recovered. Ethan's stomach dropped. Weight recovered. Arya's voice was quiet. I am not the only survivor. The realization hit hard. Someone else, someone like Arya, was still out there. Before Ethan could say anything, the station's alarm suddenly blared to life. A mechanical voice rang through the halls. Unauthorized access detected. Intruders will be neutralized. Ethan groaned. Oh, come on. Arya spun toward the exit. We must leave now. They ran, boots pounding against the metal floor as the sounds of security drones activating echoed behind them. Ethan glanced at Arya. You got the files? She nodded. He grinned. Good. Because we are so out of here. The doors ahead slammed shut. Ethan skidded to a halt. Oh, that's bad. A voice crackled over the station's speakers. Calm and almost amused. You should not have come here. Ethan sighed. Yeah, well, we're full of bad decisions today. The voice chuckled. Let's see if you survived this one. The lights flickered and the drones moved and Ethan gritted his teeth. Arya, she was already raising her weapon. I am ready. Ethan smirked. Good, because I have a feeling this is going to get messy. The corridor pulsed red with emergency lights as the drone surged forward, metal limbs clattering, weapons primed. Ethan exhaled sharply, adjusting his grip on his blaster. Well, he muttered, this is going to suck. Arya, standing beside him, was calm as ever. Perhaps, but we have a higher than zero chance of survival. Ethan shot her a look while encouraging. She tilted her head. I thought so. The drones opened fire. Ethan dived behind a fallen console as plasma bolts seared through the air. Arya moved like a shadow, sidestepping, weaving between shots with impossible precision, her own weapon flashing as she returned fire. The first drone went down in a shower of sparks. Ethan popped up and fired at a second one, but the shot ricocheted off its reinforced plating. Great, he grumbled. Armor, because this wasn't hard enough. Arya barely spared him a glance before flipping onto a ledge, vaulting over the nearest drone, and planting a shot at the exposed joint in its neck. It collapsed. Ethan stared. Okay, show off. She ignored him, already reloading. There will be more. Of course there will. Ethan blew, out of breath. All right, plan B. Arya arched a brow. What is plan B? Ethan grinned. Run. They took off down the hall as another wave of security drones poured in from side passages. The station groaned as if it were alive, the remnants of its old security programming coming back to exterminate intruders. Ethan shot out a control panel, forcing a bulkhead to slam shut behind them. That'll slow him down, he said. Arya glanced at the countdown timer flickering on a security monitor for approximately 90 seconds. Ethan groaned. That's practically a lifetime in bad decision land. They sprinted toward the hangar, but as the doors loomed ahead, a new voice crackled through the speakers. Cold, deliberate. You cannot leave. Ethan skidded to a halt. Okay, that's ominous. The voice belonged To a man standing at the end of the corridor, flanked by two heavily armed guards, his face was partially hidden by a sleek high-tech visor, but Ethan could feel the authority radiating off him. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan demanded. The man's visor flickered, scanning Arya. "She belongs to us." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "She's not a thing." Arya's stance remained rigid, unreadable. "You are with Project Revenant." The man nodded. "I am here to reclaim what was lost." Ethan clenched his fist. "Not happening." The man tilted his head. "You do not understand. She is not just a soldier, she is a key." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Key to what?" Arya's expression darkened. "To finishing what they started." The man took a slow step forward. "Your memories may be fragmented, but the programming remains. You were designed for something greater." Arya. Ethan saw the hesitation flicker across her face, the old doubt, the questions. "Not this time. She's not yours," Ethan said, stepping in front of her. "And she never will be." The man sighed. "Then you leave me no choice." The guards raised their weapons. Ethan grabbed Arya's wrist. "Time for Plan C." She hesitated. "What is Plan C?" "Improvisation." He slammed his boot onto a maintenance hatch, sending it crashing down, and dragged Arya through. They hit the ground in a dark, narrow maintenance tunnel, alarms blaring above them. Ethan grinned. "See, improvisation." Arya stared at him. "That was reckless but effective." She considered this debatable. They bolted through the tunnels, emerging into the hangar, where their ship sat waiting behind them. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Ethan scrambled up the loading ramp. "Start the ship." Arya moved to the console, fingers flying over the controls, engines powering up. The hangar doors slammed shut. Ethan swore. "They're locking us in." Arya exhaled. "I can override it." "Well, hurry up, because I think our new friend is about to." A deafening boom rocked the ship as the blast doors behind them were blown apart. Ethan spun to see the man standing in the wreckage, not a scratch on him. His visor flickered, and the guards raised their weapons. Ethan sighed. "Man, I hate this guy." Arya's hands flew across the controls, lunching. The ship lurched as the thrusters engaged, lifting off the ground just as gunfire erupted. Ethan ducked behind the controls as bullets ricocheted off the hull. Then, with a final burst of energy, the ship shot through the hangar doors, streaking into the storm-filled sky. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The ship hummed, the storm raging outside. Finally, Ethan slumped into the co-pilot's seat. "Well," he said, breathing heavily. "That sucked." Arya was quiet, her silver eyes locked on the stars. Ethan studied her. "You okay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I am free." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, you are." She turned to him. "Thank you." Ethan grinned. "Hey, what are partners for?" She considered this causing destruction, apparently. Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, well, I excel at that." Arya glanced at the holopad, where the files they'd stolen flickered across the screen. "There's still much to learn," she murmured. Ethan leaned back. "Yeah, but for now." He stretched his arms. "I vote we get a drink." Arya tilted her head. "Alcohol has minimal nutritional value." Ethan grinned. "You're really killing my vibe here." She was silent for a moment, then to his shock she smirked. "Fine," she said. "One drink." Ethan blinked. "Wait, seriously?" She nodded. "But if you become intolerable, I will throw you out of the airlock." Ethan laughed. "Fair trade." As the ship drifted into the vast unknown, the past still lingered behind them, but the future that belonged to the end.